The man at the door was polite about it. He apologized twice before he finished his first sentence. He told Margaret Holloway that he was sorry to bother her on a Saturday morning. He told her he had tried to reach her husband several times. He told her he understood this might be confusing. Then he handed her a document. It was a closing statement for the house she was standing in. The house that, according to the document in her hands, her husband had sold to this man 11 weeks ago for $840,000. Margaret stood in her own doorway for a long moment. The Georgia morning was warm. A mockingbird was singing somewhere in the oak trees. She looked at the signature on the closing statement. It had her name on it. She had never signed anything. Margaret Ellen Holloway was 46 years old when a stranger informed her that she was no longer the owner of her home. She was the principal of Pinewood Elementary School in Savannah, Georgia. 22 years in education. The kind of woman parents requested by name. The kind of leader who remembered every child's birthday and every teacher's personal struggle. She had met Thomas Holloway in 1998 at a University of Georgia alumni event. He was in his second year of law school, charming, precise, the kind of man who read every document before signing it and knew exactly what every word meant. She had found that quality deeply reassuring. They married in 2001. Thomas built a respected real estate law practice in Savannah over the following decade. Holloway Legal Group, 12 attorneys, a reputation for meticulous, trustworthy transaction work. The irony of that reputation would later be documented in court records. Margaret trusted Thomas completely with every financial decision they ever made. He was the attorney. He understood these things. When he brought documents home for her to sign, she signed them. When he told an investment was sound, she believed him. She had given him the most dangerous thing one person can give another: total trust without question. But there were things she had never been allowed to see clearly. Financial statements that were always being updated. Property documents that Thomas always handled at his office. A joint account that she could access but rarely checked because Thomas always told her everything was fine. She had believed him. Until a stranger knocked on her door with proof that she shouldn't have. Thomas Edward Holloway was 51 years old, a real estate attorney with 20 years of transactional experience. He knew exactly how property changed hands. He knew exactly what signatures were required. He knew exactly which documenters in Chatham County had worked with his firm long enough to trust his judgment without question. He had used every single piece of that knowledge against his wife. Thomas had begun planning his exit in early 2019. There was no dramatic reason, no crisis, no discovered affair. He had simply decided, with the quiet certainty of a man who had spent 2 decades reading fine print, that he wanted a different life. And he had decided that Georgia's equitable distribution laws were an inconvenience he intended to eliminate. He started with the properties. They owned 4: the family home in Ardsley Park neighborhood, a rental property on Tybee Island, a commercial unit in downtown Savannah, and a vacation property outside Asheville, North Carolina. Thomas had purchased all 4 during the marriage. All 4 were legally marital property under Georgia law. He had begun with the Asheville property in March 2019. He had prepared the deed transfer documents himself, a benefit of being a real estate attorney. He had forged Margaret's signature on the transfer deed. He had brought the documents to Raymond Stills, a notary public who had worked with Holloway Legal Group for 9 years, and told Raymond that Margaret had signed in his presence at the office and simply couldn't make it to the notary appointment. Raymond Stills stamped and certified the document without Margaret present. He would later say he had trusted Thomas completely. By September 2020, Thomas had sold all 4 properties using the same method: forged signatures, compliant notarization, clean closings processed through his own firm's transaction pipeline. The family home sold for $840,000. The Tybee Island rental sold for $1.1 million. The downtown commercial unit sold for $2.3 million. The Asheville vacation property sold for $1.4 million. Total, $5.6 million. Thomas had also quietly dissolved his partnership share in Holloway Legal Group in August 2020 without informing his partners that the dissolution payment of $1.6 million was marital property, and transferred those funds to a private account in his name only in Charleston, South Carolina. Total, concealed, $7.2 million. In November 2020, Thomas filed for divorce. His financial disclosure listed no real property, no business assets, a personal bank account with $43,000. He told the court they had lived modestly and saved little. And then a man knocked on Margaret's door on a Saturday morning in January 2021, and everything Thomas had built came apart in a single conversation. Margaret did not panic. She was a school principal. She had spent 22 years solving problems that other people thought were unsolvable. She went inside. She made coffee. She read the closing statement 3 times. She wrote down every name, every date, every dollar amount on a yellow legal pad. Then she called her sister. Her sister recommended an attorney named Denise Caraway of Caraway and Associates in Savannah, one of Georgia's most experienced marital fraud litigators. Denise Caraway looked at the closing statement that same afternoon. She looked at Margaret and said, "He signed your name on a property deed. That is forgery. That is a felony. And if he did it once, he did it more than once. We need to pull every property record filed under your names in the last 3 years, today." The Chatham County property records told the story in under 48 hours. 4 properties, 4 forged signatures, 4 fraudulent notarizations, all processed through Thomas Holloway's own firm's transaction pipeline. Denise filed an emergency motion to freeze all accounts associated with Thomas Holloway within 72 hours of Margaret's first appointment. Thomas's attorney, Gerald Marsh of Marsh Legal in Savannah, argued the property sales were legitimate and that Margaret had been fully informed and consenting. He had not yet spoken to Raymond Stills. Nobody had. But Denise Caraway had found him. Raymond Stills was 61 years old. He had been a notary public for 19 years. He had a spotless record. And when Denise Caraway sat across from him in a conference room and placed 4 notarized documents in front of him, documents he had certified without the signatory present, his face told her everything before he said a single word. He cooperated fully. He provided a sworn statement detailing every conversation he had with Thomas Holloway about the documents. He confirmed that Margaret had never been present. He confirmed that Thomas had told him it was a procedural formality. He confirmed that he had trusted Thomas's word because Thomas was an attorney and a long-standing client. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't known. The case was heard before the Honorable Judge Caroline Marie Dupree at the Chatham County Superior Court in Savannah, Georgia.
docket number 2021 CV 03341. Proceedings began in August 2021. Denise Carraway built her entire case around 4 words. He knew what he did. She argued that Thomas Holloway was not a husband who had made poor financial decisions. He was a licensed attorney who had used 20 years of professional expertise to commit systematic forgery, fraudulent notarization, and deliberate concealment of marital assets, crimes he had been uniquely qualified to execute and uniquely responsible for knowing were criminal. Gerald Marsh argued that the property sales had been discussed verbally between the couple, and that Margaret's signature had been given with her knowledge, if not her physical presence on the documents. Margaret took the stand on September 14, 2021. She was asked one question by Denise Carraway. "Mrs. Holloway, did you ever agree to sell your family home?" Margaret looked at Thomas across the courtroom. She said, "I found out it had been sold when the new owner knocked on my door." The courtroom was completely still. Then Raymond Stills took the stand. He confirmed under oath that Margaret Holloway had never been present for any of the 4 notarizations. He confirmed that Thomas had told him on each occasion that his wife had already signed. He confirmed that he had stamped the documents based entirely on Thomas Holloway's word. Gerald Marsh had no effective cross-examination. Then Denise Carraway introduced Exhibit 22. It was an email from Thomas Holloway to a private Gmail account recovered during discovery from his law firm's server, sent in February 2019. It read, "Starting with Asheville. By the time she figures it out, there will be nothing left to figure out." Judge Caroline Dupree read the email twice. She set it down. She looked at Thomas Holloway with an expression that needed no translation. And she said, "Mr. Holloway, you are an officer of this court. You have spent 20 years asking clients to trust the integrity of legal documents. This court has read your email, and this court is done listening to your attorney." On October 19, 2021, Judge Caroline Marie Dupree issued her ruling. She awarded Margaret Ellen Holloway the full $7.2 million in concealed marital assets, citing Georgia Code Section 19-310 and the deliberate, professionally executed nature of the fraud. Thomas Edward Holloway was referred to the Georgia Bar for immediate disciplinary proceedings. His law license was suspended within 30 days and permanently revoked 6 months later. The Chatham County District Attorney filed criminal charges of forgery in the first degree, fraudulent notarization, and fraud upon the court. Thomas pleaded guilty in February 2022 to 3 counts of forgery and 1 count of fraud. He was sentenced to 6 years in the Georgia Department of Corrections. Raymond Stills surrendered his notary commission voluntarily. He was not criminally charged, but received a formal censure from the Georgia Secretary of State. On the day the verdict was read, Margaret walked out of the Chatham County Superior Court into the Savannah afternoon sun. A colleague from Pinewood Elementary was waiting for her on the steps. Margaret looked at her and said, "I have to go back to school on Monday. There are children waiting." He spent 20 years building a reputation on the integrity of legal documents. Then he used that reputation as a weapon against the one person who had trusted him most completely. Thomas Holloway thought his expertise made him untouchable. He had forgotten that the same system he had spent 2 decades navigating had a place for people exactly like him. It is called a defendant's chair, and he sat in it. Margaret Holloway did not get back the years she spent trusting a man who was quietly selling her life out from under her, but she got back every dollar, and she went back to her school on Monday. Because that is what people of real integrity do. They show up. If this case showed you something about what happens when the person you trust most is also the most qualified to betray you, tell us in the comments. And subscribe to Divorce Diaries for a new true crime courtroom documentary every week. Because justice does not always arrive when we expect it, but in this country, in these courtrooms, it arrives.